Sixth grade, this is a video about the I'm on a Boat lab. I wanted to give you some tips because we ran out of time in our last class, so this should help you over the weekend while you're thinking about how to write that lab and putting together a draft to send me. The first thing I wanted to remind you about is that you need to include a data table. Your data table that we created in class, and we were recording how many marbles each boat could hold. Make sure that data table is organized. Okay? If you kind of just jotted down information during class, you should redo your data table. I would suggest typing it because typing it always makes sure that it's neat, it's in lines, it's organized. But for this, if you want to keep a handwritten data table, that is okay so long as it is neat. If it is not neat, it will lose points. So a data table, we're recording three things. We should have a space for the name of the group. We should have a space for, see, my handwriting is not neat, so I would want it typed personally. We want the name, so the people in the group. You would want the number of marbles, round one, and number of marbles, round two. Then, you'll have whoever, group one's name, so like, Mr. Cowman. And then the number of marbles that I was able to put on my boat in round one and round two. Obviously a million, I won. That way it's very organized, and you'd have the next group's name, right here going across, okay? So make sure that it is neat, it is organized. I think typing is the best way to do that, but I will leave that decision up to you. Question one, why were some boats more successful than other boats? What was it about the most successful boat that allowed it to carry the highest number of marbles? Were there any other factors that were important to think about? This question should be approximately 2 paragraphs long. So I'm going to draw your attention to that information. This means that this is the most detailed question you are writing in this lab report. You should be spending some significant time here. If a paragraph is somewhere between 3 to 6 sentences, you're going to have somewhere between 6 to 12 sentences written up in 2 paragraphs answering this question. The best thing to do would probably be to talk about a couple different boats. You want to talk about a couple of them. You can talk about ones that worked really well and ones that did not work well. Worked well, didn't work well. If you talk about both what worked and what didn't work, that gives you some points for comparison, and it really highlights what you need to focus on if you're building a boat to carry the most number of marbles. This obviously should, have some basis in science, right? We might want to reference the density equation or talk about mass and volume and talk about those things, but it also should be based in engineering, right? We were actually constructing something. So what construction practices actually helped make a better boat, right? Were there parts or different engineering strategies that worked better than other ones? We saw some of those canoes didn't work very well. Why, right? We want to talk about why we're seeing this stuff. The other thing that we might want to look at, and I'm going to kind of make a squiggly line over here. The other thing would be what changed between round one and round two. So what I mean by that is a group between round one and two. So a group that did not do very well in round one might have done much better in round two. And the question is, why? What did they change, right? That group right there provides very good specifics on what didn't work well in their first round, but then what did work well in the second round. And that gives you perfect comparison to talk about what does actually work. What changes did they make? Remember, while, of course, we all want to build the best boat the very first round, that's often not how life works. So this is an actual engineering process that we did, where we had a plan, we tested it, and depending on how it worked, we went back to the drawing boards and made changes. That's what actual engineers do all the time. They try to make something, and then they improve upon it and make little small changes. There was a group in this year in 2015 that had the winning boat in round 1, and they tried to make some changes for round 2, and it actually didn't work as well. That's also part of this, right? So what they would do is they'd go back to what they did in round 1, and that's okay. They were trying new things. So we should talk about that. What did we try? What worked? What didn't work? Question 2, if each group was given the same amount of clay, everyone started with the same mass. Therefore, what variable was each group manipulating? And manipulate means change, messing around with. Explain. So if we know our density equation, I'm not going to tell you, I want you to remember that, but if we know our density equation, and if we are changing around the mass, what variable or variables are we manipulating, right? What are we actively changing to make the boats better or worse? Then you need to explain how that was done. So how did we manipulate that variable? Right? Give specific examples. How did we do that? That would be talking about the engineering process. How did we actually change that remaining variable, right? If we didn't change mass, therefore we were changing something else, and that's what you should be talking about in that question. So this, all told, should be about 3 paragraphs in total. If I could spell, paragraph does not start with an R. Paragraphs. Because we're going to have 2 here and 1 here. That equals 3 paragraphs, okay? As well as a very detailed, written out, very neat data table on the piece of paper as well. That will all get stapled together and turned in. Remember, this needs to be typed up and printed out for class. As always, I am happy to look over a draft if you want to send me one. Please shoot me an email if you've got any questions.